Professor, author, commentator, and evolutionary psychologist Jordan B. Peterson has been hospitalized for several months, and Michaela Peterson, his daughter, came out with a statement today.
Has been like watching a movie. Our family's relying heavily on the Lord through this and seeing miracles around us. We are. And I'm also aware that God uses everything for good. So eventually we'll see why this is happening or what comes of it. But Mom and I in particular really wanted to reach out and ask for prayers to help everyone get through this, especially for my dad and for my mom, but also for the nurses and doctors taking care of him, my brother, and family and friends who have come to support us. I miss my dad.
For those of you new to the channel, my name is Casey. I'm the Rumble Right Dad, and I went back to school in part for my master's and doctorate in psychology because people like Jordan B. Peterson led the way, along with Jonathan Haidt, Brad Wilcox, and some of my other heroes of psychology, actually took the slings and arrows for a great many of us who knew that common sense, morality, integrity, and biblical truth were necessary in this space. If you would, please like, share, and subscribe on the way in so we can fill the void left by some of these great men that have been silenced in the last several months. If you're like me, in the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination, I looked to Jordan Peterson for leadership because he has so much to say about how we interact with each other politically, including the prevalence and the adjudication of left-wing violence across our culture and society. And when his voice was not apparent in the wake of that assassination, I began to dig a little bit into what was going on with him, and we found out a little bit more information this morning by Michaela Peterson.
Couldn't find a cause for. She was diagnosed with idiopathic pulmonary hypertension, which seems to have resolved, praise God. But it's not something that happens. This was late July after Dad and I recorded some episodes of the call-in show together.
I've read most of his books. I've seen him in person, and I've even interacted with his wife, Tammy, and this man deserves our prayers today, as well as our uplifting in the way and the wake of what he's done for young men in society. The culture we have now deserves and needs voices like his and Charlie's, for that matter. And it is with great sadness that I'll be in prayer for him, as well as for Chris Williamson. It seems some of the great voices that are fighting for manhood and masculinity have been silenced all at the same time. And it's time for a new generation of leadership, but it's also time that we honor and pray for our dude, Jordan B. Peterson.
Life while working harder does not fix it.
Grasping for fresh air through the midst of black mold.
And that was an unbelievably difficult pill to swallow.
My wife and I went to see Jordan Peterson on the We Who Wrestle with God tour, and while he has very interestingly tackled biblical truth in the last several years, and with his most recent writings, it was not his greatest work. His greatest work initially was speaking to young men and saying that they can make their bed, clean their room, and do one labor with love at a time and pick their way through to having a meaningful life. And that will always be the legacy that I'll remember him for. But when I had a complete loss of status in my life 5 years ago, and I read his book, 12 Rules for Life, it did pick me up in many ways, more so than my own father did, and helped me get back on a track towards having a meaningful, purposeful marriage, a great relationship with my wife and children, and to continue my practice as a therapist during that time.
More education. Can you tell us about that?
Well, one reason, the entire transcript of an interview that I did with Joe Rogan was submitted as evidence with regards to the unacceptability of my views. What I was doing primarily in that interview that was criticized was questioning the validity of the economic models of economic collapse that were stacked upon the unstable models detailing out climate change 100 years into the future. That was deemed in Canada sufficient to proceed with complaints against me with regards to my professional competence to serve as a licensed psychologist. That was only one of many anonymous complaints that were fostered directly in relation to my political views.
Well, I thank you for showing up today. I think they may use your testimony as evidence that your re-education has not been successful.
Jordan Peterson has certainly made some political statements that the right would call mistaken in the last several months. However, the general body of work is so powerful and so great, and I pray that we will not need to have this conversation soon, but if anything worse happens to him, he will be greatly missed, because his voice was one of truth that cuts to the quick and cuts through the nonsense. And he became most famous initially for standing up to the Canadian government, saying that he will not be compelled to say the pronouns when it was literally being written into law in Canada.
Something that you define purely subjectively is an idea without status as far as I'm concerned. I also think it's unbelievably dangerous for us to move towards representing a social constructionist view of identity in our legal system. The social constructionist view insists that human identity is nothing but a consequence of socialization, and there's an inordinate amount of scientific evidence suggesting that that happens to not be the case.
In short, we must pray for Jordan Peterson. We must seek to try to acknowledge and honor and uplift his contributions that have happened. And no matter what you think of him as a member of the Daily Wire in his tackling of biblical truth, he had played his part in the revival and the reignition of biblical knowledge that was going forth as a result of his work in these panel discussions that he was having about what is true and what even might be psychologically relevant within the biblical text. Chris Williamson of Modern Wisdom recently released a video about how he too was suffering from some mold and other, like Lyme disease and other difficulties. Jordan Peterson obviously has been hospitalized. He was in the ICU. He was even close to near death, apparently, according to Michaela, several times, as well as the loss of Charlie Kirk and many others. This means that there is a global loss of voices that were speaking to young men in meaningful and powerful ways. It's time for us to pick up the baton from where they left it. And as much as we can, I would love to play a part in that. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Prayers for Jordan B. Peterson.